My wife said, "I'm moving in with Jacob." My reply made her realize she just lost everything. I still remember the exact sound of her voice when she said it. Not broken, not ashamed, not even slightly apologetic. Just cold, the way a stranger speaks to someone they have already decided does not matter anymore. We were sitting at the dinner table, the same heavy oak table we had picked out together at a furniture store in our second year of marriage, back when we still argued about whether the finish was too dark and whether the legs were sturdy enough. I had paid $800 for that table. I had carried it up a flight of stairs with a friend of mine because we could not afford movers. For 14 years, it had held birthday cakes and Christmas dinners and tax paperwork and coffee mugs with rings on the bottom. I had thought that night would be a quiet evening. Pasta from a jar, something on television, the ordinary silence of a Tuesday. Instead, she set her fork down, looked straight at me with eyes that had already finished grieving something, and said, "I am moving in with Jacob. We are having a baby together." The world stopped. Not dramatically, not with a soundtrack. It just stopped, the way a clock stops in the middle of the night and you do not notice until morning. The hum of the refrigerator was still there, the faint sound of traffic 2 blocks over, a dog barking somewhere down the street, all of it completely normal while the floor of my entire life dropped out from underneath me. I had built everything around this woman. 14 years of early mornings when the alarm went off at 5:15 and I did not complain because I knew she liked to sleep in. 14 years of late shifts and overtime paychecks handed across the kitchen counter without hesitation or resentment. I had skipped a promotion that would have sent me to the regional office 2 states over because she had said she did not want to uproot our lives, and I had agreed without argument. I had passed on a business opportunity with an old college friend that our accountant had estimated could have generated 6 figures in its first 18 months, because she had said the timing was not right for us, and I had believed her when she used the word us like it meant something permanent. I had been the kind of husband who showed up, not just physically, but completely, financially, emotionally, structurally. I was the foundation she stood on, and she had used that stability to build something with someone else. And she had been walking through Jacob's apartment door for months. I had known about Jacob long before she said his name at that dinner table. He was a co-worker, someone she had introduced me to once at a company event with the kind of casual wave that people use when they are performing comfort. He was tall, loosely dressed, the kind of man who laughs a little too loudly at his own observations. I had shaken his hand and thought nothing of him. The changes came slowly, the way water damage comes. First, you notice something slightly off. Then you realize the problem has been spreading for longer than you knew. The late evening messages that made her smile at her phone and then put it face down without saying anything. The sudden attention to how she looked before leaving for work on ordinary mornings. The kind of effort she used to save for occasions. The way her phone never left her grip, never charged on the nightstand anymore, always carried from room to room like something she could not afford to leave unguarded. I had sat with those observations for weeks before I drove to the address I found by checking a location her phone had pinged late on a Friday. I had parked down the street on a Thursday afternoon, engine running, radio off, and I watched her walk through his front door with the ease of someone who had done it many times before. I said nothing that night when she came home. I made dinner. I asked how her day was. I listened to her answer, and I started preparing. She kept talking at that dinner table, filling the silence I deliberately refused to give her. Her voice lost some of its coldness as she spoke, replaced by something that was trying to sound like conviction. She said Jacob made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in years. She said the passion had evaporated from our marriage like something neither of us had managed to hold on to. She said she was exhausted from pretending that she wanted the life we had assembled together, that she had been going through the motions for longer than I understood, that this was not something that happened overnight. She wanted me to know there was a narrative, a reason, an emotional history that justified what she had done. I sat completely still and let every single word land exactly where she intended it to land. I did not flinch. I did not interrupt. I gave her the full courtesy of my attention, which is something she had stopped giving me a long time ago. She expected me to break. That had been the design of this conversation. She had chosen the dinner table, the quiet evening, the timing of the confession. She wanted tears, or raised voices, or something she could frame as the proof that she had been right to leave. She wanted a reaction she could carry into the next chapter of her life and use as justification. What she got was silence so complete it unsettled her. After several minutes of watching me not react, she stopped talking. The room held still. I could see her reading my face for information and finding nothing useful. I leaned back in my chair slowly, deliberately, and asked her one question in the calmest voice I had used in months. "And you thought I would not find out on my own?" She blinked, just once. But that single blink said everything. The color shifted in her face, subtle but visible, the way light changes when a cloud passes in front of the sun. She tried to recover, pivoting back to language about her feelings and her needs, and Jacob and what she deserved. I let her finish the second speech the same way I had let her finish the first. Then I told her 2 words. "Good luck." She laughed, but it was nervous, too high in pitch, and she asked me what that was supposed to mean. I told her that while she had been spending her evenings in Jacob's apartment, I had been spending mine sitting across a desk from a family law attorney. That I had paid a retainer of $2,500. That I had documented proof of the affair going back several months, photographs, time-stamped location data, written correspondence. She had not been careful enough to fully delete, financial records showing joint account activity during the period she had been maintaining what amounted to a second life. That the divorce filing was nearly complete, had been reviewed twice by my attorney, and was ready to submit. The nervous laugh stopped completely. Her face went the kind of white that has nothing to do with lighting. She had walked into that dinner expecting to leave it on her own terms. She had anticipated that the conversation would go a particular way, that I would be devastated and unorganized, that the emotional weight of the moment would put her in control of whatever came next. She had expected to negotiate from a position of leverage, to leave with the house, to split the accounts in a way that felt fair by her definition, to walk out of 14 years of marriage carrying the better half of what we had built together. She had not expected a man who had already drawn the map of exactly what she was entitled to, down to the last line. The tears came then, and I want to be honest about what those tears were, because they were not what they might have looked like. They were not regret. They were not grief over the marriage or the years or the person she had been to me. They were the tears of someone watching a safety net dissolve in real time. Jacob had been exciting in secret, wrapped in the thrill of something forbidden and uncomplicated, but she had never once sat down and calculated what life with Jacob actually cost. The apartment he rented, the salary he earned, the reality that a baby does not care about passion or how alive you feel, the bills, the sleepless nights, the 100 ordinary responsibilities that she had been insulated from for 14 years because I had been standing between her and all of it. A man whose commitment had never been tested by anything more real than taking her to dinner and sending late-night messages was now the person she had chosen to build everything on. I watched her understand all of that in the span of about 45 seconds. She asked me to sit back down, to talk, to think about what we had built and whether any of it was worth saving. Her voice had changed completely now. The cold certainty was gone. She sounded like someone who had just realized they had misread every single variable. I looked at her across that $800 oak table, the one we had carried up a flight of stairs, the one that had held 14 years of our life on its surface, and I said, "You made your choice. Now live with it." I stood up from that table, walked down the hall to my home office, and opened the center drawer of my desk. Inside was a manila folder I'd been building for weeks, adding pages the way a person adds bricks, carefully and with purpose. Every receipt, every photograph, every piece of correspondence my attorney had advised me to preserve, every financial document relevant to the division of assets. Everything I needed was in that folder, organized and labeled in the kind of order that only comes from doing something with total intention. I picked it up. I turned around, and she was standing in the doorway of the office. She had followed me down the hall. I had not heard her. She was gripping the doorframe with one hand, her eyes fixed on the folder the way you look at something that represents the final version of a loss you had not fully accepted until right now. She asked me what was in it. I told her she already knew. She asked me if I was really going to go through with this, and I told her that I already had. The filing date had been set for 4 days from that conversation. My attorney had everything she needed. She slid down the doorframe until she was sitting on the floor, which was something I had never seen her do, not in 14 years. She pressed her hands against her face. She said she had made a mistake. Not once, but several times, quietly, into her palms. I sat down in my desk chair and I let the quiet sit between us for a long time. Then I said something I had been rehearsing without knowing it for weeks. I told her that the mistake was not one night or one decision. The mistake was months of deliberate choices, each one made in full knowledge of what it cost. The mistake was looking at 14 years of a man who showed up for her every single day and deciding that was worth less than the feeling she got from someone who had never once been tested. I told her that I had not made this decision in anger. I had made it with a clear head and a full understanding of what I was walking away from, which was the same clarity she had never offered me. She asked about the house. My attorney had already addressed that. Given the documented evidence of the affair and the financial contributions I had made to the mortgage over 14 years, the picture was clear. She would not be leaving with the house. She would not be leaving with the split she had imagined. She had assumed, in the way that people assume when they believe they hold all the emotional cards, that her departure would be managed on her terms. But emotion does not write legal agreements. Documentation does. She left that night to stay with her sister. She took 2 bags and she left the oak table where it was. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be straightforward about that because I think it matters. Going through the right thing and going through the easy thing are rarely the same process. My attorney moved efficiently. The documentation I had assembled held up exactly as she had predicted. The affair was established clearly, and the financial record of our marriage was detailed enough to prevent the kind of revisionist accounting that sometimes happens when one party tries to reframe their contributions after the fact. Jacob, as it turned out, had not been entirely honest with her either. 2 weeks after she moved her remaining things out, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Jacob had been far less enthusiastic about the baby than he had led her to believe during those months in secret. The version of him that had made her feel alive had been built specifically for the context of secrecy and excitement. When the reality of an actual shared life arrived with bills and appointments and responsibilities, the version of him she had gambled everything on began to look considerably different. I did not feel satisfaction about that. Not exactly. What I felt was the particular calm of someone who had made a decision rooted in their own integrity rather than in reaction to someone else's choices. The divorce was finalized on a morning in early spring. I sat in my attorney's office and I signed my name where I was directed to sign it, and I walked out into weather that felt genuinely different from the winter I had lived through to get there. Not warmer exactly, but cleaner, the kind of air that has space in it. I still have the oak table. I know that might seem like a strange thing to mention, but it is the one detail that I have thought about more than almost anything else in this entire story. My friend who helped me carry it up the stairs 14 years ago came over the month after the divorce, and we ate dinner at that table, and I told him the whole thing from the beginning. He listened the way a good friend listens, without performing a reaction. When I finished, he looked at the table for a moment and said that it was a good table. He was right. It is a good table. What I have come to understand, sitting at that table in a house that is now entirely mine, is that the most powerful thing I did in this entire situation was not the attorney, not the documentation, not the response that made her face go white. The most powerful thing I did was decide, weeks before that dinner, that I was not going to let someone else determine the terms of my own life. She had made her plans assuming I was a passive element in them. She had miscalculated who she was dealing with, not because I am a hard man or a cold one, but because I had spent 14 years being someone who showed up, and that same quality, that same reliability, that same refusal to do things halfway, was exactly what I brought to protecting myself when the moment required it. She had counted on my love making me slow. What she had forgotten was that it was the same quality that made me thorough. I have spoken to her once since the divorce was finalized. A brief, practical conversation about a document that needed a signature. She sounded tired in a way she had not sounded at that dinner table. She did not mention Jacob. I did not ask. Some people, when they hear this story, want to know if I am angry. The honest answer is that I was, for a period of time, deeply and quietly angry in the way that only comes when you realize how completely you were taken for granted. But anger that size either consumes you or it teaches you something. I chose the second option. I chose to let it clarify what I valued and what I would never again underestimate about my own worth. I eat dinner at that oak table most evenings now. I cook things I actually want to eat. I have a level of peace in my daily life that I had forgotten was possible. The kind that comes not from having everything figured out, but from knowing exactly where you stand and having built that ground yourself. She said she was moving in with Jacob. My reply made her realize she had already lost everything she had taken for granted. And the one thing she never accounted for, the one variable that undid every plan she had made, was that the man she had underestimated had been paying very close attention for a very long time.